Sub-Saharan Africa is home to nearly 10% of the world's population. So think of that, 1 in 10 people live in Sub-Saharan Africa. And an estimated 25 million people in this region have HIV. That's just your general information. Okay, part A. If the world population is approximately 7.5 billion, estimate the population of Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so think about what this means. We know 10% of the world lives in Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so we can set this up either as a proportion or as an equation, but think of this. You know that the world is 7.5 billion. So 10% times the world is Sub-Saharan Africa, which would be 0.75 billion. If you wanted to set that up as a proportion, percent over 100, the world is everybody. Sub-Saharan Africa is the part. So that blue proportion up there would be the proportion. Either way, you get 0.75 billion. Now remember, we don't usually talk that way, 0.75 billion, but every 3 decimal places is a new name. So if I want to go this way, 3 places, that would give me 750 million. So the population of Sub-Saharan Africa is 750 million. And keep that in mind, we're going to need that in a future question. Question number 3, actually, or I guess part C. Part B. There are 35 million people in the world with HIV. What percent of those live in Sub-Saharan Africa? So the key here is what percent. So remember, we talked about what percent, so that's x over 100. Now, 35 million people, is that part or is that whole? Well, we're comparing the world to Sub-Saharan Africa, and hopefully you understand that Sub-Saharan Africa is the part and the world is the whole. So 35 goes on the bottom, and now you're thinking, well, what goes on the top? Well, go back here. Remember, 25 million people there have HIV. So 25 million out of 35 million, what percent is that? So we cross multiply, we get 35x equals 2500. Just to reiterate how we solve a proportion, we divide by that number in front of x, and we have roughly 71.4%. So just over 71% of the people with HIV in the world live in Sub-Saharan Africa. Isn't that crazy? That's just crazy. So what percent of the Sub-Saharan Africa population has HIV? So once again, we're talking about what percent. And now we're talking about what percent has HIV. So now we're talking about the total population and those that have HIV. We know, based off before, that 25 million people in Sub-Saharan Africa have HIV, and we know from part A that there are 750 million people. Since both of these numbers are in million, I don't have to add that in there. It just works the way it is. So again, we cross multiply, and we end up with roughly 3.3%. So if you think about what that means, if you go to Sub-Saharan Africa, percent again means out of 100, so let's just round that to 3. That means for every 100 people you encounter in Sub-Saharan Africa, 3 of them would have HIV. That's kind of putting it into context of what does this mean. In 1993, the median age of death in Sub-Saharan Africa was under 5 years of age. Explain what this means. Okay, now we know percent is 0 to 100, and the median is in the middle, right? Okay, I don't know why I said 0 to 100. That doesn't really need to happen here. But anyway, that's okay. The median, we know, is in the middle. So we're saying these are all the people that died in terms of the age of people that died. The median, the number in the middle, is 5 years old. So that means half of the people that died were under 5. And the other half were greater than 5. But think of that, what that means. If 100 people died, 50 of them were under the age of 5. That's just crazy. That's such a large number of kids, dying. It's very sad. And once children lived past the age of 5, life expectancy went up significantly. It's a tongue twister right there. What would you say that age at death in Sub-Saharan Africa was skewed left or right in 1993, and explain? Okay, I like to graph these when I'm thinking about them. So if we're talking about, these are the age at death, right? Age at death is what we are graphing, and this is the number of deaths. So when we talk about this is 0 and this is 100, and we know that most, right, 50% of them is 5 or below. So this is probably age 5. So we have a ton of deaths at this spot, right? Because they're, and then it kind of tails off. They still die as they get older, but life expectancy, right? They expect to live longer. So therefore, because it's tailing to the right, this is skewed right. Now let's look at a different picture. And this one can be a little bit crazy because you got a lot of lines, but let's look at this. Which country had the longest life expectancy among these countries over this time period? So we're looking at country. You can see this is the world line right here. We're not talking about the world, we're talking about which country. So the tallest, because here's the life expectancy on your vertical axis. So the tallest bar is here, and that is Botswana. And again, these are African countries. So Botswana, in roughly 1990, had the largest or the highest life expectancy at about 64, it looks like. And now part number 3, what's the shortest life expectancy? So again, now we're looking, this is Sub-Saharan Africa as a total, this line here, but that's, again, we're not looking for that line, we're looking for a country. So this is the lowest part, and that is Zimbabwe. And that looks to be about, I don't know, maybe 2003. And the life expectancy is roughly, I don't know, maybe 43 years. So if you lived in Zimbabwe in 2003, or if you were born in Zimbabwe in 2003, you could expect to live roughly 43 years. That's the life expectancy. And in number 4, the AIDS epidemic affected life expectancy in Sub-Saharan Africa in the 90s. Okay, so if you look at it, here's 1990. Look at all of these African countries, their life expectancies plummeted at that point in time. Is that reflected in the world? Well, again, here's the world line. And not really. I mean, I say no. I mean, you can argue this however you want. And you might say, well, it kind of flattened out a little bit. But not even really that. You can see it continues on a gradual increase. And so even though Sub-Saharan Africa had this huge dip in life expectancy from 90 to 2000, there really wasn't an effect on the overall world life expectancy. And that's it.